On today's episode of Locked On Wilds, the top 100 NHL players, as voted on by Locked On NHL hosts, was unveiled today. The Wild have a few players on the list, but I got to ask, are there really 51 NHL players that are better than Matt Boldy?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
Hey, this is Marcus Foligno, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are taking a look at the top 100 NHL players list, courtesy of the Locked On NHL hosts. We put a list together. We voted, and now the results are here, so we get to dive in. The Wild had a few names on the list. We'll tell you exactly who and whether they were in the right spots. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, credentialed for the 2025-2026 season, and host of Seth on Sports as well. It's finally here. We have been compiling a list of the best in the NHL. And we finally get the chance to break down where everyone slots in. And I brought the homework here this week, so we're going to have some data to back things up as to where particular players should be at. So this will be a good one here today. We're going to start obviously in the top 10 because the Minnesota Wild do have a top 10 player on this list. And I think that's absolutely the right call. The top 10, according to Locked On NHL, number one player in the entirety of the National Hockey League is Connor McDavid. That's not a surprise. Nathan MacKinnon at number 2. Leon Draisaitl at 3. Cale Makar is at 4. Nikita Kucherov at 5. Austin Matthews is at number 6. Connor Hellebuyck at 7. Kirill Kaprizov is at number 8. Alexander Barkov is at number 9, and Quinn Hughes is at number 10. So Kaprizov at 8. I thought about it initially, and I'm like, boy, that seems a little on the high side. Not really. If we look at the statistics, and I went all the way back to 2021, 2022, which was that was an 82 game season. I would have gone to 2020, 2021 when we first got the Kirill Kaprizov experience, but it was a shortened season, so I went with the 82 gamers. It just was easier math-wise for me to iron all that out. So since the 2021-2022 season, Kirill Kaprizov is currently 15th in the league with 335 total points. He is 13 points behind Jason Robertson in roughly almost 60 fewer games, 56 fewer games to be exact. As far as goals go, Kirill sits at Kaprizov currently sits as far as the goals department. He is currently sitting a little further down the leaderboard, but so he's 10th in the league in goals, 15th in total points. So you may be saying, why do you think Kirill should be a top 10 player in the league? There's a different number that infinitely tells the story, and that's really the only one that matters, and that is points per game. We got points per game, and we have goals per game as well. So Kirill Kaprizov has played, as we mentioned, over the last 4 seasons he's played in 264 games. If you look at the total number of games over the last 4 seasons, that's 328. So keep that in mind here. So Kaprizov has played 264. He's missed 64 games over the last 4 years, which if you want to math it up, that averages 16 games lost per season. So Kirill is, over the course of the last 4 years, he's averaging 1.27 points per game that he plays. 335 points in 264 games. So 1.27 points per game and 0.6 goals per game. Now let's extrapolate that over 328 games, shall we? So 328 games. I know it would be highly unlikely that he would have played all 328, but even if he plays 300 games, he would be a lot higher on the list in these categories. So we'll start with the total points, and then we'll see where he's at as far as goals go. So 328 games times 1.27. That puts him at 416.5 points, which would put him ahead of David Pastrnak for 5th in the league in that span. 5th in the league in that span had he played the full 328 games. Even if you go 300 games times 1.27, that gets him to 381 points, which would put him at 9th, just above Austin Matthews. So the 1.27 points per game, that's the number to keep in mind, and that has Kirill Kaprizov tied for 6th with Austin Matthews. Now, as far as the goals go, as far as the 0.6 goals per game goes, let's do the same thing here. 328 games times 0.6, that is 196.8 goals, so 197 goals. That would put Kirill Kaprizov 3rd in the league behind Leon Draisaitl and Austin Matthews, had he played 328 games. Even if he played 300 games, he'd be at 180 goals, which would put him 4th. That would be ahead of Alexander Ovechkin. So total points, total goals, not the metric you need to be going with here. Points per game, goals per game, in which Kirill is not only a top 10 player, Kirill Kaprizov's 0.61 goals per game is 4th in the NHL over the last 4 seasons. So his scoring, and if you back it up even further, he's at 0.6 goals per game since 2021-2022, which is tied for David Pastrnak for 4th. So by all accounts, he's not only a top 10 player in the NHL, he's a little higher on the list even than that. And so I have no issue with him being in the top 10 whatsoever. As far as players and the impact that they make when they play, his impact is impossible to question. When he's on the ice, the Wild are an infinitely better team than when he is not. Now, as far as the top 10 itself goes, is Connor Hellebuyck a little too high at 7? Is an MVP caliber goalie a little too high as one of the 7 best players in the league? If it were me personally, I would also bump Nikita Kucherov up a little bit. And as Ian McLaren, the Locked On Bruins host, pointed out, David Pastrnak not in the top 10 is kind of a shame. But again, Kirill Kaprizov, as far as per game metrics go, he should be 4th on this list. So, top 10 player? You're darn right he's a top 10 player in the league. Just a shame that he hasn't played more games, because the numbers would be even more eye-popping than they are. So, Kirill leading the way for the Minnesota Wild at number 8 on the list. The next player on the list is a little further down. which leads me to ask the question, are there really 51 players that are better in the NHL right now than Matt Boldy? We'll attempt to answer that question as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. The Minnesota Vikings, the injury news continues to plague the team. The over-under on the game against Cleveland this weekend is now 35.5, which is unbelievably low. And kind of makes me wonder, would that be worthwhile to throw $5 down on? The Minnesota Vikings were 3.5-point favorites. Browns are starting a rookie quarterback. It feels like a pick'em type game. So use that as your $5 bet. If it wins, then you can throw futures down on the Vikings to win the division, which is plus 1,000, and to make the Super Bowl, which at last check was plus 5,500. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today to get started. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. And if you want the full top 100 reveal, you can head to Locked On Podcasts, the Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel to check that out. So, Kirill Kaprizov at 8. The Minnesota Wild do not have a player on the list for a few slides, but we move to 51 through 60. And lo and behold, Matt Boldy's on the list at 52. Jacob Slavin at 51, Boldy at 52, Jake Sanderson at 53, Jason Robertson at 54, Clayton Keller at 55, Devon Taves, 56, Elias Pettersson at 57, JT Miller, 58, Nick Suzuki, 59, and Philip Forsberg is at 60. So what about Matt Boldy's stats over the last few years? Now, for Boldy, we are looking back to 2022, 2023. So we're getting the last 3 seasons for Boldy to try to get a representation as to where he sits on the list. So Boldy, since the 2022-2023 season, he's tied for 52nd, or he's tied with Kevin Fiala for goals with 87, which is one more than Jack Eichel has in that span. As far as the total points go, Boldy is currently sitting in right about the same spot. Boldy's 205 points have him 56th in the league since 2022-2023. So by those metrics, he's in right about the same spot, because you look at his per game numbers, his points per game, he's at 0.86 points per game, which has him 80th, tied with Rasmus Dahlin, Evgeny Malkin, Jordan Kyrou, Anze Kopitar. So by the per game metrics, he should actually be lower on this list. But again, there are a lot of ties here, so the actual ranking numbers certainly vary. But I kind of like giving Matt Boldy some love at this point in his career. I know the NHL Network did a list as far as the top 20 forwards in the league, and Boldy made the list there. So I feel like he certainly is getting appropriate love from NHL Network. And it's entirely possible that I am ranking him higher on this list because of what he did in the postseason. And just feeling like, if he can carry that over the course of a season, that he could very much have a monster year. So he's at 0.86 points per game right now. Well, what would happen if he got up to a point per game span over the course of that same amount of time? Because he's played quite a few games. Boldy's been very durable during the course of his career. So he has played 238 games over the last 3 seasons, and the number of games possible is 246. So he's been pretty durable as far as games played go. But even if Boldy was at a 1 point per game over that span, well, he'd be up to obviously 238 points, which would put him tied with Kyle Connor for 23rd. And if he went from 0.37 goals per game to 0.5 metric jumps that you would expect from a young player, that you'd hope a young player could achieve, 238 games played times 0.5 or divided by 2, that'd be 119 goals. And that would put Boldy 11th in the league behind Tage Thompson. So that doesn't really do anything to determine where he's at now, but I'm telling you, if he can put some seasons together going forward where he gets closer to a point per game and maybe half a goal per game, some of those types of metrics, that ascension, if he can do that, then he is going to vault higher on this list. And is going to get, maybe closer to 40 or to 30, or even get closer to 20 or 10. Maybe the Wild at some point will have 2 top 10 players in the league. Yeah, we'll see what happens with some of their prospects. But just looking at some of the other lists here, or the other portions of the list, being that the Wild didn't have anybody from 8 to 51. 41 to 50 includes a couple of Winnipeg Jets, a couple of Panthers. Sam Bennett at 49 feels outrageously low. 31 to 40 features Jake Ottinger, Ilya Sorokin, a couple of goalies, and Tage Thompson as well. 21 to 30 features several Lightning players. Is Sam Reinhart listed twice on here? No, it's Sam Bennett and Sam Reinhart. Sam Reinhart at 27 also feels low. And then 11 to 20, you've got a couple of stars, David Pastrnak, Eichel and Marner, and Igor Shesterkin as well. It just feels high for the goalies. That's maybe just my personal opinion on it, but it feels like a high number for the goalies to be in the top 20. I don't really have a ton of issue with the other players on this list, but obviously, I think the top 10 is mostly set. Cale Makar being at number 4 he's an outstanding defenseman. He's an unreal defenseman. He can get it done in both areas. So it was a fun list to put together, and it's just interesting to see kind of the reactions to it. Now, the Minnesota Wild, they've got a few more players than just those 2 that made the list, but we got to move down here slightly. Let's talk about the biggest surprise in the top 100 players list to kind of lead us off here when we come back. There's one name I was not expecting to see on this list, and he's in a spot that honestly I think, I was shocked by it initially. The more I think about it, probably makes some sense. We'll talk about the 67th best player in the NHL, according to our Locked On NHL hosts, Joel Eriksson Ek. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We have some plans that we are putting into place for next week for some big guests. Got one lined up for Monday's show already. And we've got a new segment. It'll be probably be a show, but we'll see. It might be a segment that we're going to be doing throughout the course of the year as well. It's a little bit of a power rankings spin to it. So getting the works, getting the final tweaks in place for the regular season because 7 days from now, a week from today, the Minnesota Wild will be on the road taking on the St. Louis Blues to start off the season. So let's move as we continue through the NHL top 100 players list. Let's move to 61 through 70 because as I present to you, Joel Eriksson Ek made the list. I did not expect to see him on this list, if I'm being totally honest. Did not expect to see him on this list whatsoever. But let's think about this for a second. As far as forwards go, and as far as as far as all the things that centers bring to the table, Joel Eriksson Ek is I feel like always underrated. I feel like he is criminally underrated by just NHL evaluators. He is a defensive pest and is somebody that it just really uncomfortable to play against when you're out there on the ice. And somebody who just makes life miserable for players that he is going toe-to-toe against. So Joel Eriksson Ek at 67 feels kind of like let's give him some credit after some real workmanlike years that he's put in over the course of his career. Now the numbers, he's not going to be in the same wheelhouse as some of the elite centers in the game as far as points go, but Eriksson Ek is 49th amongst players that are listed as centers, 49th amongst them in points. And as far as the goals category goes, Eriksson Ek is a little further down the list than that because obviously this past season being injured that kind of dropped his numbers, and it's been a gradual progression for Eriksson Ek to get to the point that he is currently at, with getting up to the 30 goal mark and just continuing to progress, or he was until this past season, which really seemed like it kind of robbed his progress. So for Eriksson Ek, as far as the stats go, you could argue he probably shouldn't be on this list, but this is, I think, the first instance in which I will really preach both sides of the ice. Eriksson Ek, by the way, 37th amongst NHL centers in goals with 93 since the 2021-2022 season. Now, if we take out a year and go strictly based on the last 3 seasons, I think that vaults Eriksson Ek up a little higher on this list. 41st in the NHL as far as goals go over that span with 67. So again, a guy who brings a lot more to the table than just the offense. So I'm not going to campaign for his removal. That was the one that I was surprised by. Is really all I'm going with. 81 to 90 on the list. We finally get to Filip Gustavsson, who makes the list as the 90th best player in the NHL. Gustavsson was 7th in the league in wins with 31. As far as save percentage goes, he was also Save percentage, he was based on the the guys that played regularly. Gustavsson was in the top 10 there as well. Really just puts a lot of solid tape out there. He was 4th in the league in save percentage, and amongst regular starting goaltenders, he was 9th in goals against average. And he scored a goal this year. So that should bump him higher on the list just by default. This is the one that I feel like Gustavsson should have been higher on this list than 90. And maybe this is an instance where you flip him and Joel Eriksson Ek, and you put Gustavsson between 61 and 70. If you are going to let's just compare where Gustafsson's at to a couple of the other goalies on this list. He had the same amount of wins as Darcy Kemper and Sam Montembeault, 2 wins behind Sergei Bobrovsky, and Sergei Bobrovsky was a little higher up on the list. He was 47. So you're telling me that a goalie who had a better save percentage than Sergei Bobrovsky, had more games played, and 2 fewer wins should be 43 spots lower on the list? He had 5 fewer wins than Jake Ottinger, who was 31st on the list. So I think if I had a chance to kind of redo this list, I would probably just put Filip Gustavsson at 67, because then the next goalie that you run into is UC Saros, who was injured this past year. Darcy Kemper's at 80. So Gustavsson should be above Darcy Kemper and probably UC Saros. And Linus Ullmark's on there at 75. So I'd put Gustavsson at 67. I'd move Joel Eriksson Ek to 90. And that feels more accurate as to where he should be on this list. But there was one more player that made the list for the Minnesota Wild. That was Brock Faber, who tipped the scales at 98, just ahead of Erik Karlsson and just ahead of Tomas Hertl, just behind Logan Cooley on the list. And for Brock Faber, amongst the defensemen, he has not played nearly as many games, but if you want to just look at where he ranks over the last couple of seasons as far as points go, and I still, don't get me started on, he should have won the Calder. I'm just going to keep saying it. Faber is 32nd amongst defensemen with 18 goals over the last 2 years. And in that span, he has played 160 out of a possible 164 games. So he's tied for 32nd with goals. He's tied with Bowen Byram, Thomas Chabot, and Travis Sanheim. One behind Charlie McAvoy and Jake Wallman. As far as total points go in that span, Cale Makar has 182 points in the last 157 games. That's just disgusting. He's so good. Brock Faber is also 32nd in total points. So top 30 in the NHL as far as points go. Now his points percentage at .48, he is just outside the top 50 amongst NHLers. NHL defenseman, he's at 54th with .48 points per game. But I do like Faber being included on this list. I think because he's a young up and coming defenseman, I think that's a good spot for him. And honestly, don't have a ton of issue with where the Minnesota Wild landed on this list, with the exception of Filip Gustavsson and Joel Eriksson Ek. I think you flip those two. I think you're fine. Kirill Kaprizov's definitely a top 10 player in the NHL. Matt Boldy, maybe a little low, but I think he can certainly work into a higher spot on this list. This is going to be something that I think we do on a yearly basis. So awesome opportunity to look at where these players are ranked and where they'll be ranked when we do this again next year. How high do people jump? We'll definitely be taking a look at that. But let me know what you think. Do you think 5 is too many players on this list? Do you think they're too high, too low, just right? Let's Goldilocks and the 3 Bears this list to try to figure out if the Wild are in the right spots. Make sure to let us know in the comments and stay tuned with us as our next episode comes at you tomorrow. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.